By the way, there was a claim which this guy made also. They come to us, they say, you see, your Islam comes 600 years after our Jesus, and your Islam is the only text which says that Jesus was not crucified. Why should we believe a book which comes 600 years later, goes against every historical text of Tacitus, of Josephus, and whatnot? Why should we believe in it? Right? This is what this guy said also. But what if I told you that the Jewish followers like Peter, like James, like John, the historical followers were against crucifixion? Then the question comes up, how could my prophet know this? So they think crucifixion is a weak point in Islam. It is one of our strongest points because it brings us back to the direct eyewitnesses of the happening. And if people want to come up, let's come up. Let's see what Peter believed about this. Let's see what James believed about this.
I was going to ask about the crucifixion. That's not the only thing that that the Muslim belief is. Wait, is it the fact that you Muslims don't think that Jesus was crucified, or does it matter to you?
It's a
We
core in their
know.
belief. It's a core concept in the
You
Christianity.
see,
No,
actually, if you ask
I know the
Muslims,
Christians. I know the Christians hold that Jesus was crucified and he was put in a tomb and he resurrected. Right. However, I'm asking you as Muslims in belief of Allah and your religion, does it matter to you whether or not Jesus was crucified or not, or is it just the fact that you guys don't think that Jesus is God, part of the Trinity, right?
No, of course we believe it did not happen because we firmly believe, and this is 100% our position, because it's clearly stated in the Quran that it did not occur. So, if there is evidence that it did occur, yes, it would disprove that verse, but there isn't,
Is
as
there
this is
evidence
where we're
that
pointed out.
is there evidences that crucifixions happened?
Crucifixion happened in general, you mean?
That's not what
Yeah,
we are
like
discussing. That's not what we're
like
discussing.
yes, you see, in general, we have evidence that the Romans crucified people. We have evidence of Egyptian crucifying people. So the concept of crucifixion, we are not denying. But Jesus is specific being crucified. There is not one evidence for it. But the early evidence of the direct followers of him goes against this crucifixion narrative. So there is no evidence for crucifixion, and other evidence shows he was not crucified.
thank you for sharing that. That's the first time I heard of that. That's pretty interesting.
Actually,
Okay, let's go through the verses of the Quran and let's see which book is more historical. Okay, no, if you want, go to Surah Al-Nisa,
Yep,
Ayah 157.
157.
You see, there are many claims and many qualifications for that claims only in one verse of the Quran. You see, the Quran says the Jews said one claim. So go through all the claim, Akhi, and we go through qualification. Let's see which book is historical.
Inshallah. So you want me to read 157, just the translation?
Yes, let's just start from the couple of first words.
Cool.
You see what the Jews say.
Okay. And for boasting, we killed the Messiah, son of Mary. We killed
Okay,
the Messiah, Jesus, son of
okay.
Mary,
This
the
is the
messenger of
first
Allah.
claim of the Quran. Our Quran is telling us that the Jews were saying they killed the Christ. Yeah? The verse is clear, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, sure. Is this claim historical? Were the Jews who said they killed Christ? Yes or no?
Yes.
Right? So the first claim of the Quran in this verse is historical. In first century, in second century, in third century, and even in seventh century, there are Jews who say we killed the Christ. Even in the 20th centuries, there are Jews in Jerusalem who are proud of killing the Christ. So the first claim of this verse is historical. Okay, let's go to the second claim of this verse.
Okay. And then the second claim is, but they neither killed him nor crucified him.
Okay, yeah. So the claim here is that Jesus was not killed and was not crucified. If we ask them, is this verse historical? They say no. All of the historians, all of the atheist historians, Jewish historians, everybody agrees there is a fact about Jesus. That fact is that he was crucified. So they say this part of the verse is not historical. Yeah. So the first part of it is historical. Everybody agrees. The second part of it is not historical according to you. Go ahead, Akhi. Quran qualifies this claim of him not being crucified. Akhi, read.
And then it goes on to say, it appeared to them so.
Okay,
Then
so Jesus was not killed, was not crucified, but it only appeared to them. Why did it appear to them like that? Why did it appear that Jesus was crucified? Now the Quran says that. Akhi, tell us.
even those who argue for this crucifixion are in doubt.
So the first reason is they had doubts about it. Yeah, remember this doubt. What is the second one?
They have no knowledge whatsoever, only making assumptions.
So first one is doubt. Second one is no knowledge, assumption. Okay, what is the third one?
Last part is, even those who argue for this crucifixion are in doubt. They have no knowledge whatsoever, only making assumptions. They certainly did not kill him. And that's the end of the verse.
Okay, this verse makes many claims and many qualifications. The Jews were making claims. Allah reacts to those claims and He says why other people who differ with the Quran. What is the reason for that? One of the reasons was doubt. Yeah, اختلاف. Now, is it historical that the early Christians of the first century had doubts? If we go to Steve Mason, if we ask him, he says yes. Why does he say that? You see, these people, as historical sources, use the 7 letters of Paul as a first century document. The manuscripts don't go to the first century. This is an assumption. But they say because Paul lived in that century, he wrote letters in that century, and 7 of them we think as authentic. It tells us about the situation from the first generation Christians. In First Corinthians, he writes to these Corinthians. He says the people of Chloe have come to me, and they say there is a heiress. Eres is the god of strife and means literally in Arabic اختلاف. Wallahi. So the people of Chloe come to Paul and say there is a اختلاف between us. Quran already told us. What was this اختلاف then? You see, he said some of you say we follow Peter, others say we follow Apollo, others say we follow Paul. You see? So Quran says there was اختلاف. And we see here, according to Corinthians, early Christianity, Paul, Apollo, uh, Peter, they had ikhtilaf, they had different understanding of it. Yeah. So the first claim of Islam, which they had ikhtilaf, is historical and goes back to the first century. Second claim of the Quran was that they had shak, they had doubts. One of the authentic letters of Paul, which goes back to the first century, according to these historians, is the letter to the Galatians. In chapter 3 of Galatians, Paul talks about those people who the disciples were coming to. You see, before Paul was writing to them, disciples were going to Galatia and teaching about Jesus. Paul writes to them and it says, "Oh, foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? It was before your very eyes that I pornography Jesus as being crucified." Pornography is as a billboard, as a drawing. So he says, I portray to you a Jesus who is crucified. Who has bewitched you that you all of a sudden don't believe that he was crucified? So the people who Peter went to in Galatians were foolish to not accept the crucifixion. So we had the ikhtilaf in Corinthians, we already saw it. We had the shak, we already saw it in Galatians. Yeah, okay? They had no knowledge, is the last point, yeah? Of the claim of the Quran. They had no knowledge. Who is the first man in the history of mankind who ever wrote that Jesus was crucified? The first man who ever wrote this was Paul. Nobody before him wrote ever that Jesus was crucified. Nobody. You understand? So he comes and he tells us Jesus was crucified. He in before him, no man. We have the Gospel of Thomas, nothing about the crucifixion. We have the Gospel Q, nothing about the crucifixion. So before Paul, no man. After Paul, all of a sudden crucifixion. Who? How did he get his information about crucifixion of Jesus? He tells us in Galatians multiple times. I know nothing more except him being crucified. This is my Jesus. This is my gospel. If anybody comes to you and preach another gospel and another Jesus, let him be cursed. So he gets his information from revelation, he says, not a historical source, not somebody who witnessed the crucifixion, not the disciples who were there. No, a spirit who gave him his information. But he himself, in the letters of Philippians, talks about the Jewish followers of Christ. Those followers had the letter of recommendation from Jerusalem church. Paul called those people who were authoritative according to Jerusalem church the enemies of the cross. You hear that? So the earliest Christians having authority from James, Paul is calling them the enemies of the cross. They are servants of the Lord. They mutilate the flesh. They are dogs and they are enemies of the cross. So, which means Paul goes against the early Jewish Christians, the followers of James, who was an eyewitness of the whole happening, and he was the enemy of the cross. Paul, who himself says, my revelation comes from his spirit, no man has added to me, says, oh, he was crucified. No knowledge, only assumptions. You see, Yahi, only one verse of the Quran gives us so full information about the historical happening, which my prophet never, ever, ever, ever could have known. So actually, the claim in the Quran, which says that Jesus was not crucified, proves that the Quran is from God and not otherwise, as these Christians claim. Sorry, Afan, if I went too long.
No, that was brilliant.
Assalamu alaikum wa
Subhanallah.
rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
May Allah bless everyone here in this room and gather us on the podium of light, inshallah ta'ala.
Amin
Beside
ya Rab.
Allah.
Yeah, I think you missed it, Abdul Munim. So it's the connection that Akhi Ali made to what Allah revealed in the Quran to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there's nowhere for him to actually know this information during the time that it was revealed. And he broke it down just one verse and the claims that that one verse makes and how that mirrors historically to what we know today. SubhanAllah. And I'm glad this room is recorded so I can actually revisit that and take those references down. What? Jazakumullah khair, akhi, that was brilliant.
Thank you, Ali, for clarifying
2:30,
that,
man.
Ali. Every time I'm in a room with you, I apologize it's breaking up on my side, but every time I'm in a room with you, Ali, I learn something new. Jazakallah khair.
Barakallah, hopefully I say the same about you, Akhi.
You know, this is one of the fascinating things, Ali, that consistently the most adamant claims that the Christians make. You know, this is 100% true. It's a fact of history. Blah blah blah. And the very person who they follow as the main teacher of their religion is the one pointing to them that this was not the case. You know, um, even in the first century, let alone later than that. So it's just fascinating that. They continue to hold on to these claims when it can be debunked by their own text.